The best thing the international community can do to support democratic activists around the world is to practice what it preaches. If we uphold political freedom and the rule of law at home, then there's a much better chance that other people will be inspired and want to copy us abroad. Another thing we can do, which is really important to protect democracy around the world, is to punish the people who attack it. We can use asset freezes, we can use visa bans, we can use other means. We have to make it clear to authoritarians and tyrants everywhere that attacking democracy and attacking human rights defenders and democracy activists is not risk-free. It comes with a cost, and we're going to impose that cost.
The other big area for citizens to get involved with to create a resilient democracy is to help respect, build, and rebuild a trustworthy press. I like to say that a trustworthy press is the immune system of democracy, and it really took a beating in 2016, did somewhat better in 2020 in the US, but just needs to keep getting better and better.
The most important thing that the international community can do to support democracy activists is to create an international an atmosphere in which modern autocracy finds it much more difficult to operate. I'm thinking about the banking system. I'm thinking about money laundering. I'm thinking about tax havens. One of the one of the elements of Western policy that has been most helpful to the growth and spread of autocracy, and which helps autocrats stay and remain in power, are these elements of the Western financial system. We have allowed them to be used by autocrats and in order to keep and maintain their power. And that has made it very difficult for democracy activists to find space to be active inside their own communities.
Democracies of the world should work together to forge a common strategy to protect against efforts from authoritarian states to intervene in their politics, governance, and information space. We are always stronger when working together.
We can think harder about internet reform and how to regulate the internet. And this I'm saying not because necessarily decisions taken about the internet in the United States will be followed in Russia or Belarus, but because at the very least we can begin to offer a real alternative. At the moment, the American political conversation is kind of, chaos, trolling, and disinformation campaigns. It doesn't really offer an alternative. It doesn't offer something better that people can look to or turn to. Beginning to think a little bit more about regulating algorithms, or at least understanding them and understanding how they work and monitoring them. Thinking about creating public service alternatives to modern social media. All of that, those are things that may sound distant from democracy activism, but will, I believe, create a more balanced and more intelligent public space. Both, as I said, both the financial sector and the informational sector right now are places where autocrats find it easy to be active. American style and Western style social media has made possible trolling campaigns and spying and surveillance of a kind that was never possible before. And by the same token, the American and Western banking system has made it possible for autocrats to steal, hide, and use money in ways that wasn't before. So I would start really with things that involve in some ways cleaning up our own house. And that I think, begin to make it easier for democracy activists to have successes in other kinds of states.
Democracies of the world should be prepared to address anti-democratic trends within their own borders. A healthy democracy is much more resilient to external pressures than a divided one. Third, democracies of the world should work together to update the international architecture, ensuring that democratic values remain valued on the international stage.
What's coming up fast also are organizations that help people understand how a trustworthy news outlet does its job, and then holds a news outlet to account when sometimes things go wrong. Because sometimes news outlets get things wrong, and then they correct them when it's brought to their attention. In the US, the evolving mechanism is called the Trust Project, which helps people hold news outlets to account when things go wrong unintentionally or intentionally. It does have work being done throughout the globe, but also throughout the globe, particularly in Europe. Reporters Without Borders has the Journalism Trust Initiative, which much like in the Trust Project, has a set of model editorial guidelines, basically codes of ethics, so that a news outlet can say, hey, we're going to be trustworthy, here's our principles, and if the news organization has a lapse of behavior, they can be held accountable to that.
The COVID-19 pandemic has been terrible for public health. It's been bad for democracy as well. It's allowed the spread of disinformation and conspiracy theories. It's corroded public trust. It's created great psychological and social stresses, which are really bad for our democratic institutions and our democratic processes. It's also been a huge distraction. All the money and time we've spent dealing with COVID is money and time we could have spent doing other things like standing up to autocrats and to tyrants and strengthening the resilience of our system. But there's one plus from the COVID-19 pandemic. It has highlighted the need for international cooperation and the need for resilience. If only we'd shown a bit of that in advance, we might not have been bearing such a heavy price now.
Democracies of the world should work together to update the international architecture, ensuring that democratic values remain valued on the international stage. While it can often feel like today's challenges are insurmountable, we've also seen incredible reason for hope as people from Belarus, Russia, Hong Kong, and so many other places around the world have proven that the desire for democracy and liberty is as strong as ever.
So right now, I think regular people, ordinary citizens, can hold news outlets to account, but new and better means are coming to that end. And between voting, between trustworthy news, that's how regular citizens can promote the resilience of their democracies. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be necessary.
Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, who's being honored at this conference, is an example of somebody who wasn't political, wasn't active in politics at all. She, didn't think of herself as even being a political person or being part of a political conversation. And one of the effects of the aggression and the change in the nature of the autocracy in Belarus is that it drew, first her husband, and then her into politics, and then many other people. And so while it is true that autocracies working together, autocracies using the financial system in new ways, autocracies seeking to control and manipulate online and other kinds of conversation are more sophisticated than they used to be, that also means that the reaction is broader and deeper than it used to be as well. I do see a lot of, as I said, either apolitical or ambivalent people being brought into politics in new ways, and that's true. And by the way, in established democracies as well as in autocracies, that seems to be a bright spot. That you see new kinds of activism and new kinds of people being involved in activism who would never have been before.
There's a lot of doom and gloom around, and we've got to be sober in our assessments. But that doesn't mean we have to be pessimistic. I'm thrilled to see Taiwan standing up to the communist authorities in mainland China and showing that a Chinese-speaking country can be a democracy. I'm thrilled to see Lithuania standing up, not just for Taiwan, but for the democratic movement in Belarus, and championing European and Atlantic values. I'm thrilled to see people in so many countries standing up against Russian and Chinese bullying. I'm also glad to see that American democracy has passed the test this January, when we were horrified looking from outside at what was happening on Capitol Hill on January the 6th. It's really good that that's behind us.